I thought my life was over. Didn't say this to you, but I thought I'm leaving a wife and two little kids, and hopefully I've lived pretty well, but that's it. Because I didn't have information.
What I'm hearing is this journey of no control to how you two, as a patient and care partner, were able to get to a place of more confidence in terms of both dealing with the diagnosis, the treatment, and just living life in general with it. So how did you start? Where would you describe where the two of you were at the very start of this, at the first diagnosis, if you were to give some color on that?
So Andrew, I recall at the point when you got a diagnosis of CLL that both our reaction was what the heck, what is this? And for me, it felt very much out of our control. It's like, oh my God. I mean, what was your reaction?
I thought my life was over. I didn't say this to you, but I thought I'm leaving a wife and two little kids, and hopefully I've lived pretty well, but that's it. Because I didn't have information.
It seemed to me that what happened was you had those feelings. I think if I think back, I probably had some of the same. I was like, oh my God, I'm losing my partner in life, and my kids won't have a father. But there was a real transition when you and I talked about it and we started to get information. So, and my recollection was that we knew somebody who knew how to research these things.
Right. When we first went to the oncologist, we'd never been to an oncologist before, and he gave us this diagnosis of chronic lymphocytic leukemia. We were both in tears and didn't know anybody, didn't know what it was, etc. And you're right. Our friend, David Noodleman, helped us on our home computer connect with others, and ultimately connected on the phone with a leader. And if you recall, Esther, I started going to lunch with other CLL patients in Seattle, where we lived. So we started connecting, and then it was the search with their help for the smartest doctors.
Right. And you did that in seeking out peers, and in parallel with that, my way of sort of getting my feet, under me was to try to get a handle on my emotionalism and, to get counseled and, use some medication and whatever, to be able to be there for you and for the kids.
Right. You remember that somebody referred us to a counselor, and I think his wife had leukemia. I seem to recall that. And he said, hey, Esther, you're kind of an emotional person.
Yeah.
Maybe you try St. John's wort.
That's right.
As a natural substance to see if it takes the edge off. You had been opposed to any kind of medicine. You thought it would be invasion of the body snatchers.
Yeah.
But it worked.
No,
right?
yeah, it did. It did work. And, I think that that's a real example of how you and I, being very different personalities, were dealing with gaining some control in what seemed like an uncontrollable situation. And at least I remember that once we got to the right doctor, we understood the diagnosis. I do remember that it was a little hard to swallow that it was Dr. Keating. If I remember, we ultimately got to a special specialist. When he said you don't need treatment maybe for years, there was this hurdle to get over of, what do you mean you're not going to do anything for years? Once we got past that, it felt a little bit more controllable, or felt more calming, I guess, at least it was for me.
Less urgent, maybe.
Less urgent.
So I went from feeling I'd be dead tomorrow to We don't have to do anything right away, but you're right. It was worrisome, and I think just in the family, well, what does this mean? When? How do we go on? What should we say to you? What should we not say to you? When do you go to the doctor again? What did the doctor say? And we had that with our children. Certainly Ari, who I think was 6 or 7. Yeah, and he started to ask questions. And the thing, you remember this, Esther, when Ari asked me, he said, well, we explained that Daddy had a sickness in his blood. Ari was like 7. And he said, will you be there for my bar mitzvah, age 13 in our Jewish religion? And I said, yes, but I didn't know.
At what point do you talk to your children and what can they comprehend? But I do remember that. And I also know that in the situations where people have chronic conditions, that there are these ups and downs of either waiting for treatment or waiting for the next blood test. And I know that when you would go for those exams, there was a little bit of that anxiety again, is another shoe going to drop? Is this going to be the time that you're going to need treatment? And is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because I was like, okay, we're waiting, now do something. So when they did something finally, I actually felt better than knowing that, the period of time where they were doing nothing. So I don't know how you felt about it.
I felt the opposite. I said, oh my God, I didn't want to face it. And if you recall, the treatment started in Houston, MD Anderson Cancer Center, this big monolithic monument to cancer research and treatment. We were not from Houston, didn't know anybody from Houston. So we're definitely strangers there. And I did not want to be there. I wanted to just go on. Yeah, you got this diagnosis, but it's not really going anywhere. Just let it ride. I wanted to just let it ride. I was not ready for treatment.
I love that.
There you have it. 2 people.
Very different perspectives.
Different reactions. So
this is a very introductory, sort of piece to show what this will be with a lot more time devoted. So as we wrap in the last couple of minutes, I'd love to hear from both of you on some of the topics people can look forward to, that you feel would be really important for them to hear, and just, fun, informative, educate, but also fun and light and showing the human side of this experience. What would the 2 of you like to say will be covered as we have these conversations with the both of you?
I think there's some funny things that have happened along the way, like meeting some great people. Fortunately, with my illnesses, which have been long-term, I've gotten to know my providers pretty well, the nurses, the doctors, as people. And so I think that's been pretty rich. There have been some episodes that have been screwy, fainting, or just memorable moments, that, you've had to work with your team, and also just funny conversations you've even had with people trying to figure out, well, what's going on with you,
I think a couple of topics off the top of my head is, it was very clear when we met with the specialist that was the right guy. And there were a number of reasons for that. There was our local oncologist, and there was this so I think talking about what does it take to have a good relation, when do you know you got the right person taking care of you? That's one. Another, I think, is for people like yourself and like us, how do you broach treatment and longevity and those things with children, with family? I think that relapse, how do you, once somebody's through treatment, how do patient and care partner deal with the specter of relapse? What does that mean? How are the reactions different?
How do you plan?
Yeah. How do you plan your life knowing that there's this thing out there that could or could not impact what you think is the ideal future.
Yeah. How do you travel?
Yeah.
So what if you get sick when you're traveling? What are your resources? What's the solution?
There's a lot
that
there's a
enough?
lot we're going to talk about. I feel
Yeah.
like you've given so much already. Thank you both so much for the time today.